Welcome down the rabbit hole, friends. I'm so glad to have you here with me again tonight. We're getting to the down and dirty of what a cameraman from the Duggar show 19 Kids and Counting recently had to say to a longtime 19 Kids and Counting blogger named Pickles. If you guys aren't aware, I've done a whole video about who Pickles is and what her deal is in the past. I'll put some excerpts from that video at the end of this in case you're interested in checking it out. Right now, Pickles runs a Facebook page called Life Isn't All Pickles and Hairspray. You should check it out. There's a lot of information on the page all about the Duggars. Pickles and the people within the group talk extensively about what's going on with the kids currently. And long before many of us were looking into what was happening in the backgrounds of the IBLP, Pickles was blogging about some of it. So yesterday, Pickles posted in her Facebook group this note. Recently, I was contacted by someone who worked behind the scenes of the Duggar show for many years. This person has been vetted and is a reliable source. From what I've seen with Pickles, she's always really good at being careful, not jumping headfirst into any information that she gets, and she's careful about talking about her sources. I believe once before she's talked about someone who was a cameraman on the show, and I think that she is a very reliable blogger when it comes to getting information about the Duggars. I don't see her as being someone who sensationalizes things, maybe a little bit more like me. So I was very interested in hearing what she had to say about her interview with this cameraman. Now, I want to take you guys back. I've talked about this before in prior videos, but do you remember the sad, sad story that stays in my heart forever about Jana Duggar? All right, let me give you some information on how this all goes, because some of you may not be aware that Jim Bob was a freaking genius when they got this show started and off the ground with TLC. Because they had already done some prior one-off shows like 16 Kids and Pregnant Again, Jim Bob knew the ropes when it came to signing contracts. And instead of signing directly with TLC, he ended up creating his own production company in Arkansas. His production company is the entity that signed the contracts directly with TLC. Therefore, he was able to collect the payments and money through the production company itself, giving him more freedom and control over what he did with all those checks. Many have also speculated that it allowed Jim Bob and Michelle greater control over the filming and who worked on the film crew. From what I understand, the Duggars had to okay anyone who was going to be working with them and their kids, and there were several people from the crew who were heavily invested in their faith and Christianity. They may not have been directly from the IBLP, but they espoused some of the same beliefs as the Duggars, and that's why they were potentially allowed to be on the crew. So getting back to Jana, there is a long rumored potential romance between Jana and a young man who worked on the crew for a short period of time with Jim Bob's production company. I made a video about this in the past, and it still makes me really sad to think about it. It's possible that this rumor isn't true, but so many people have spoken out about it that it seems as though there must be something, some kind of behaviors by Jana that have led people to believe she was really interested in this guy. This is what the Hollywood gossip magazines have had to say about this story. A while back, Jana Duggar appeared to have some solid chemistry with a cameraman named Frank Soon. He filmed the family with TLC for several years. This gave him plenty of time to get to know Jana. When he went with their family to film their trip to Asia, he even snapped a photo of her and later he uploaded it to his Tumblr. Many fans think that Jana should have run away with Frank and started a new life with him. So one of the reasons that the story became a big deal is because Frank took this ever famous or infamous picture when she was dressed as a geisha girl on their trip overseas. The picture is beautiful, and it really seems to capture the essence of who Anna is. Frank posted it on his Tumblr because he's a photographer, and of course he wants to be able to get additional projects and, let people know what his work looks like. So some have said, look, he was just, this was just a good picture, and that's why he featured it on his social media. But others who claim to be close to the family have said that it looked like Jana was interested in this young man. There have been speculations that Frank soon was fired by Jim Bob after he realized that Jana had an inappropriate interest in Frank. But others have said that Frank just left to carry on with his career and ended up going overseas again for a period of time. It makes me so sad to think about Jana potentially pining away for someone. I guess we will always be in a mindset of wondering what's going on with Jana because she's chosen not to get married. Obviously, it's totally fine if a woman wants to make that choice in her life, but it's unusual within this family and within this community, and I've often wondered what's really going on for her. Now, some of this will be addressed in an upcoming live I'm going to be sharing from Brooke Arnold, where she talks about some of these issues with the eldest child, and I find it quite interesting. But let's move back to what Pickles has to say about the cameraman she spoke to now in present day. Pickles said, since the release of the Amazon docuseries, people have been questioning if those who worked on the show were aware of any abuse going on in the family, and my source wants to share their views. I'm so grateful that Pickles did this interview. Let's take a look at what the source had to say. First, Pickles gives us a disclaimer. This is not being posted in defense of the Duggars, as I know the transformed wife will take it. Pickles tends to have a back and forth with Lori, a woman known as the transformed wife, on social media. The two of them get into it sometimes, so she's putting this disclaimer out there. This is the point of view from an insider. Sexual, financial, and spiritual abuses did happen. The Duggars are just really good at hiding the abuse in this family. Pickles has definitely made a turnaround and is quite critical of the Duggars at this point in time. All right, so Pickles says, first off, my source said that during the entire run of 19 Kids and Counting On, nobody behind the scenes ever witnessed any physical abuse nor any evidence of physical abuse whatsoever. They never witnessed blanket training or encouragement. Jim Bob and Michelle never disciplined the kids while filming, but did have them trained to be on their best behavior around the crew. The crew loved all the kids, and if they had seen anything concerning, they would have said something and reported it immediately. From my point of view, I believe this. Many people have said that the Duggars were likely physically abusive. They were doing all this blanket training. There were horrible things going on in the home on a regular basis, and there's more that we don't know about. But I do believe that if a film crew was inside of the house and seeing these kinds of things happen, at least one or two people would have spoken up back then and would definitely be speaking up now that everything has come out about Josh Duggar. They no longer work for the Duggars. Many of them probably don't work for TLC, and even if they've signed a non-disclosure agreement, there are ways to get around that and also give interviews where you can receive money from magazines without anyone knowing who you are. Yet none of them have done so, which really makes me think that they didn't see anything that they can share to further the whole salacious stories about what happened within that home. I do believe the Duggars and their children were probably on their best behavior when people were visiting and the cameras were around, of course. And yet, even what we've heard from Amy Duggar and her mom Deanna on the show seems to support the idea that the Duggars kind of were like they showed us on the show a lot of the time. Not perfect, but they were definitely trying to be. Yes, they had all these issues, all these secrets, plenty of stuff going on that they were hiding from people, that's true. But when it comes to were their kids well behaved, did their kids act the way we saw on the show, it sounds like they mostly did when other people were around. Pickles goes on to say, my source claims there was absolutely no agenda by TLC or Figure 8 Films to glorify or endorse the Duggars' beliefs. But they do wonder why TLC never put up a disclaimer at the top of each episode stating, the views and opinions expressed in this program are solely those of the Duggar family and do not reflect the view of etc., etc. The source also says that they thought the Amazon docuseries was overall great and extremely accurate. They said the title of the show, Shiny, Happy People, was very suitable, considering how the Duggar kids are trained to act in social situations. The kids are not allowed to talk negatively about anything, capitalized, and the source really emphasized that. After 19 Kids and Counting was canceled in 2015 and then was rebooted into Counting On, there was hope that the Duggars would own the first scandal, bring it to light, and deal with it as a family on camera. That was the hope, at least. However, nothing really ended up being owned. So that's interesting. This source is stating, like, we went back and filmed Counting On with the idea that there was some form of redemption that could be captured by having this family show us how they go through life and address the past scandals that have come out, address the hurt feelings, address the issues among the children, address the issues within their religion. It's so true that that's what I crave from these shows. I still crave it from the Sister Wives franchise as well. I want them to come back after scandals erupt and show us what a family really looks like, what people really look like when they actually get to the down and dirty of handling and addressing the real issues which have finally come up and been brought to light on this show. It's finally time for us to see the truth and get into the reality of what people really have to deal with in real lives. Instead of shutting down the show or doing what the Duggars did, which in my opinion is to address the situation a little bit in the first couple of episodes coming back and then ignore it for several years afterwards. Instead of doing that, let's have a real and honest program where maybe even counselors and interviewers go in and speak to the family about what's going on and try to get to the real root of how we can work through whatever mess has been created and how we can live and adjust to acknowledging that our lives aren't perfect. So for sure, I've been wanting to see that from TLC when it comes to families like the Duggars and the Browns, and we didn't really get to see it on Counting On. Pickles' source said the one and only time Gothard was around during filming was in Knoxville during one of the Bates girls' weddings. Michaela Bates was seen yelling at Gothard as he passed by. "I left a birthday gift for you in your office." The crew thought that was a bit odd. The source said that sometimes the kid would quote something from Fox News, and the crew would try to help them see the issue in another way, but the kids would always respond with, "I'll have to ask my dad about that. He was the authority that does the thinking for them." Once, during interviews, when the kids were asked questions that might show their individuality, such as, "If you were a tree, what kind would you be?" the kids would be stumped by that sort of question. They would say something like, "But I'm not a tree." It was as if they had never developed any imagination or critical thinking skills. Wow, that is sad. Oh, that's so sad to hear, and that makes perfect sense with what we've seen and what we've heard about this family and the way that the schooling took place in the home. And I'm a big fan of Homeschool. I don't know why anyone acts like the Duggar docuseries or anything that I've said on my videos is really negative towards Homeschool. I have a lot of questions and concerns about what the Duggars were doing and the way that IBLP set up their homeschool. But that doesn't mean that homeschool in general is a problem or there's anything wrong with it. I think it's probably the best way to teach your children if you have the right kind of child that does well in a homeschool environment and the right kind of parent that thrives in a homeschool environment. I think it can be wonderful. But clearly, these kids were being put into a pre-formatted IBLP lesson plan that wasn't addressing like the whole individual or the education that most kids would receive within some kind of a public school setting, like the basics of learning how to tell time on a clock, which we know several of the adult Duggar children have admitted they cannot do. These are major issues, and they definitely shouldn't be ignored just because we don't want to offend homeschooling families. It's certainly not about criticizing homeschooling as a whole, but I think of it as being quite sad to realize that these little kids, these 5, 6, 7-year-olds, and I remember watching episodes where they were asking these kids these kinds of questions. What do you think about such and such? If you had to pick one food that you could eat for the rest of your life, what would it be? It's so true that they showed a real lack of creativity with many of their answers. And then there would be every once in a while that super outgoing and creative child. I remember Josiah being one of them who would come back with really snappy and cute answers, and he would stand out among the other kids in so many ways. And even to this day, people will say they'll call out Josiah as kind of standing out among his brothers and sisters. Now, this is quite interesting from the source. Pickles' source says that Austin, Joanna's husband, was reported to have said while on his honeymoon with Joanna in Switzerland that the transfer of authority from her father to me was his favorite moment of the wedding. That quote didn't make it into the show. Jim Bob had final cut on what made it into the show, which is rare for reality show personality. So interesting, right? And it's funny because Pickles says, in parentheses, she says, so he actually personally okayed the mini golf humping scene, ? That is crazy to think about. Think about the things that Jim Bob did allow into the show. A lot of crazy, inappropriate, like snarkable moments where he was like kissing on his wife and being like, hey guys, you can do this someday, but not right now. It's just me and Michelle that can kiss. Or times where he was like flirting or being kind of weirdly inappropriate in front of his kids with Michelle. Those things were okay for him, but he cut out other bits and pieces that this cameraman was able to identify. The cameraman also stated that the Duggar girls would always laugh when it suggested they court a Bates boy. Nope, not gonna happen, not their type. The source says, early in the series, one of the kids didn't want to be filmed while under anesthesia during wisdom teeth removal surgery. They were worried about looking silly as they came out of sedation. However, they did end up reluctantly doing the scene out of obedience to their father. Interesting. That is definitely something we've seen on this show and also within this docu-series where Jill says, like, I felt pressure to do these things. No one specifically said you have to do it, but I already felt the pressure. I felt a weight on my shoulders to carry the show, to continue the facade, to show the best of my family. I felt that I had to do these things. And you could see that was kind of being expected of them from the beginning, even when they were young, even when they were getting their wisdom teeth taken out. It was expected, like, you're gonna do what dad says. If dad says filming is important, then that's what we need to do. This part is crazy to me. The cameraman says that Jim Bob demanded Jeremy remove the tattoo he had on his arm before he could marry Ginger. Wow. I guess he did it in order to ensure he got his girl. Pickles wants us to know that everybody deserves the chance to voice their opinions and defend themselves if needed. I know everyone's emotions are high since watching the docuseries. Let's not be too harsh. Some of the most awful people are also the most charming. And no speculation on who the crew member might be. There's no point in it because I'll never say. Speculation will be deleted. You know, Pickles rules her Facebook group with an iron fist. That's one of the reasons I don't spend very much time in there. She doesn't really let people chat about things she deems are silly or speculation, or she's just not interested in them. She deletes a lot of it. From what I've seen, in my opinion, I see a lot of deleting. But I still think she does a great job running the page and gives a lot of good information out. I don't see her as someone who crosses any boundaries when it comes to the Duggars, so I really respect that about her, and you should check out the page. It would be interesting if her source was Frank Soon. Dun dun dun! I want to emphasize that I'm happy for Jana if she's happy living any way she wants to live. My understanding is that now she lives in a separate building on the Duggars' land and kind of has a lot of space to herself. We've also seen recently that she traveled out to California and redid Ginger's closet in her mansion for her. I hope that Jana finds all the happiness and positivity that she wants in her life. I hope she gets to pursue her own goals. It is so interesting to hear people from behind the scenes, people who are not part of the Duggar family or the IBLP system, speak out about the Duggars because they have an interesting perspective. I really liked reading the AMA from the Duggar security guard who worked with Josh for a period of time after the Ashley Madison scandal. His opinions, they stand in stark contrast to what this cameraman has to say. Artemis, the man who allegedly was a bodyguard for Josh, said that right off the bat, he had a terrible feeling about Josh in particular. But in general, he saw the Duggars, especially Jim Bob and Josh, for example, as being the kind of people you can't trust. They're being disingenuous. They are not good people. He had good things to say about specifically Jill and Derek, as well as some of the other girls in the family who he thought were quote-unquote sweetheart. But he let it be known that right off the bat, he could tell that certain people were predators. Wouldn't you love to hear more from some of the production staff from that show? Many people have accused the Duggars of using the staff kind of as babysitters, extra babysitters, because they had so many children running all over the property. And we've seen how dangerous it can be in situations where recently there have been children who've left, young children who've wandered off the property, gotten caught, and police have been involved in taking them back to the house and trying to figure out what's going on. It's a lot of children for one or two adult women to take care of. And we've definitely seen that the buddy system doesn't always work to perfection. Do me a favor and check out Pickles' page on Facebook and let me know what you think about it. I hope you enjoyed this video and that you'll join me down my next rabbit hole.